Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to Conscious Embodiment with Dr. Michael Lennox, coming at you for January 1st. Happy New Year, Zoe.
Woohoo! Happy New Year, Michael, and Happy New Year, listeners.
Happy New Year, kids. We are in the crossing of the year today. I love that the podcast is coming out right on January 1st. And if you're hearing this before 10 a.m. Pacific time on January 1st, I'll be doing my yearly astro overview, a 3-hour webinar, which you can join me live if you hear this in time and you haven't bought a seat. The recording will be available forever, so just head on over to michaellennox.com. There will not be, this is here early before the pod announcement. We usually do announcements later, but there will not be a global healing meditation this Thursday night. So there'll be no monthly meeting in January. We will resume in February. And that's not actually just to get people to buy seats in my paid Astro Overview. It's because I'm not available. I've got a big event up in my personal life coming up over that weekend. So I'm not available for Thursday night. You can check into the Astro Overview, and we are talking today about the week of January 1st through January 7th. But first, a question. Mary writes in, "Hi, Michael and Zoe. Many blessings to you both for 2024. After hearing you speak on natal yod configurations, which I thought I did not have, looking again, I see that I have one with my north node as the apex point across from a Pluto-Uranus sextile. Are points like the nodes considered legit as part of a yod configuration? If so, how would we think about this? Thanks so much, as always, for all that you do. I always get so much out of your podcast, your monthly Zoom meditation, your classes. I'm not sure how I would have gotten through these last 2 years of intense transits without them all. Cheers from Ecuador. Ciao, Mary."
I love that, Ecuador.
Yes, we are expanding our reach. So, love this question, and thanks for the kind words, Mary. Love always hearing. Never tire of hearing lovely things about what we're putting out there in the value. So, this is an interesting topic for me because I'm such an outlier when it comes to wanting to break rules of classic astrology, that things that don't make sense to me in a modern consciousness. So there are certain things that are true and so in classical astrology that I will object to. And the nodes of the moon as potentially part of a planetary pattern in a chart is definitely one of them. But I have to equivocate because I'm not just a hard, fast, yes, break this rule. So let me start with the rule. The rule is that when considering patterns in a chart, planets only. So if you have something like a grand cross or a grand trine or a yod or a finger of God, which is the same thing as a yod, or a mystic rectangle, I've talked about all of these patterns in the past. Traditional astrology says that only planetary energies holding this geometry should be interpreted as a pattern in a chart. Nodes, ascendant, midheaven, these fast-moving points in astrology don't count. Now, I remember having a reading at 25 with an astrologer named Stephanie Azaria, who became, when I was ready, my only formal astrology teacher. And I remember very clearly her spending a few moments in that first session and deciding that she was going to call the cardinal grand cross that I have in my chart a bona fide cardinal grand cross, even though 2 corners of the square were made by the nodes of the moon, not planets and points. So she broke a rule right in front of me long before I even had an interest in learning astrology. So I suspect that the reason why you only can consider a pattern is if planets make the pattern is because planetary energies are very cogent, specific things. They're generated by a planet, where the points are more abstract. The nodes of the moon are vectors of energy. They count where they're located, but they're not an object. So therefore, that object isn't holding one corner of the pattern in question. But Stephanie called this grand cross in my chart a cardinal grand cross because she recognized that choices that I would make in my life that move me from my past to my future, meaning my south node to my north node, would be felt by me as big moments of cardinal shift and change in a way that has played out, bona fide. I have moments in my life where that square is activated because of my movement from my past to my future that would necessitate calling it a pattern. I think the same thing is true of a yod. Yods are about navigating in new directions, making small choices that sort of get met by the power of the universe to push you into new directions. That's the nature of a yod. And the nodes of the moon are about our choices to move forward in different ways at different moments in our lives. So I would call a formation in a chart that involved the nodes that created a yod, just like Mary describes as a yod. But most traditional astrologers would probably not. And there you have it. So let's just talk for a moment about the fact that we're in the Capricorn mansion, right? It is New Year's Day. We tend to think of New Year's Day as a moment where we set, well, the old word was, resolutions, which we know the joke about that is resolutions turn into the things we don't do. Mm-hmm. So I like the idea of setting intention. I love the fact that in astrology, what we call the turning of the year through our calendar is also the mansion of Capricorn, where we are, in fact, in consideration of the goals and ambitions that we desire to create. Like what mountain do we want to climb, as we turn the year? I would say, though, that the juicy moment isn't January 1st. It certainly isn't for me. I'm not going to set intentions today just because it's New Year's Day. I'm going to do that in the new moon in Capricorn on January 11th and think of that new moon moment as here's where the sun and moon are both in the sign that says I'm in consideration of what I want to accomplish. Mm-hmm. So that to me is the natural moment for the begin again that we call the calendar year. But I do love the fact that since we crossed over the threshold into this year with Mercury retrograde, that by the time we get to tonight, Pacific time, 7:30 or so, Mercury will turn around and go direct. So we are done with Mercury's backward motion as of this evening, and you can think of waking up tomorrow in a world where the planet of communication is facing forward. It'll take him a little bit to get moving again. And we do have the entire first 3 weeks of January that is what we call his direct shadow, meaning he's moving direct once again, so he's forward-facing, but he's revisiting territory he's already been over a couple of times. And then when we get past the 20th of the month, he's in his free and clear for about 2 months where we don't get bothered by his backward motion. But so you can absolutely consider the next 3 weeks as likely bringing up issues for the third and final time that might have come up between late November and mid-December when Mercury was triggering stuff. He turned around on December 13th. And has been backwards since then. So that's a second hit of stuff that might have been a little bumpier. And just know that if anything was difficult in your negotiations or your perceptions or conversations that had some high stakes over the last 2 months or so, you may find that the next 3 weeks bring some resolve to some of those difficult negotiations. So he turns around tonight. We're done with that backward motion. And in terms of the week ahead, none of the triple transits that he made during his backward motion are showing up. So we won't be talking about him beyond this until next week's podcast when we move through some of those wrap-up transits. Suffice to say, it's a lovely way to start the year that after a couple of weeks of backward motion, Mercury turns direct tonight. It's definitely a quiet week. We don't start the year off in gangbusters. In fact, Mercury turning around is interesting to start the year off because while it's forward propelling to have Mercury no longer retrograde starting tomorrow, it's not like he's moving at his regular speed. He is slowed down, which means the whole first week that we are in the new year, communication is sluggish. And then we have midweek a change of Mars, and Mars changing signs we feel at the level of the body pretty acutely. This is good news for us as well, because after spending 6 weeks in the sign of Sagittarius, Mars is moving into Capricorn on Thursday. So remember, I just got done talking about how powerful it is that we start the new year up with our conscious awareness already in this mansion, that every year at this time, the sun has us thinking about what we want to accomplish. And Mars is the planet through which all accomplishment takes place. You can't build something without a body, and Mars is the planet that rules the body. So as of Thursday, we will enjoy 6 weeks of Mars operating in one of his favorite places to be, the sign of Capricorn. So let's talk about that for a moment, because today's show is a little bit all about classical astrology and modern astrology, and the dignities is one of those things where it's like, yes, Mars is exalted in Capricorn, but is that more confusing for people to learn all these little distinctions or helpful? So let me talk about what exaltation is, what it means. There are specific signs that the planets are thought to be particularly happy to be in, and that quality we call exaltation. In this case, we're talking about Mars, and Mars is exalted in Capricorn. On a certain level, I like to express these things archetypally. I talk about this all the time. It's like that Mars is exalted in Capricorn is something we don't know why. Like there's no direct knowledge as to why the exaltations exist. They're old. They come from like Babylon and possibly even Mesopotamia. Our modern Western astrology starts in Mesopotamia to Babylon, to Greece, to Rome, to Europe. That's our Western lineage. So way back in the Babylonian times, there were these signs that planets were just thought to be happy in. They called it exaltation, and for some reason, we still talk about that today. I prefer to describe energy and sensation. I think one of the reasons why people will often say to me out there in social media land, oh my God, I understand astrology so well with you, or like, you're so accurate. Why is that? It's like the reason why I sound or feel accurate to people is because I don't predict what events I think might happen from a transit or a planet moving through a sign. I talk about the sensation. What's it going to feel like? Imagine if I had an example of what Mars and Capricorn was going to bring you, and I put out one or two of those examples, but there are like an infinite number of ways that you might feel that. You're going to hear that and be like, well, that didn't happen, or I don't think that's part of my future. But if I talk about the sensation, then people go, oh, wow, I understand how to work with that energy. He's telling me how it's going to feel. So Capricorn is the energy that acquaints us with the idea that if we stay steadfast, step by step, doing the next indicated thing, we will get to the top of the mountain. Capricorn invented that idea. Mars is the planet that rules physical stewarding of energy, which is best done one step at a time. So Mars would break down how to work with energy as one action at a time. Capricorn invented that idea in the first place. So we would say Mars is exalted in Capricorn because, man, he can get to work and do the thing at hand. Venus is exalted in Pisces. That makes sense to me archetypally because Venus is about love and Pisces is all about the connection between all human beings. So she's free to express love more vibrantly, right? So once we start talking about the sensation and the archetype, an esoteric rule in astrology that seems to have no meaning other than that it's a rule suddenly makes sense. So Mars spends 6 weeks in every sign. So from Thursday to mid-February, our goals and actions will be more steadfastly met. We will have a sense of responsibility and focus that's harder to find when Mars, the planet of action, is in the mutable fire sign of Sag, where he's been for 6 weeks, where we flit from thing to thing and seek inspiration for its own sake. Once we get Mars in Capricorn, then we're like, get me up the mountain. What's the thing I have to do? I will carry the shit up the hill if I have to, and I will get it done. So I love the idea that just as we are moving into the new year, Sun is still in the Capricorn mansion. We're about to set, new moon intention piece of consciousness in Capricorn. And for the last few months and for another month or so, Mars is very close to the sun. That's why Mars is in the same sign that the sun is. So it means that the first 2 months of the year, certainly the first 6 weeks, we will be well supported to get things done at a high level of accomplishment through the principles of responsibility, steadfastness, and focus.
Such perfect timing.
Yeah,
that's just such perfect timing.
Yeah, it's great for those of us who have a lot to accomplish.
Yes.
At the beginning of the year, and as an astrologer, I'm certainly one of them. Time for the Venus overview. As you know, every week I'm offering what Venus is doing in a way that I typically wouldn't, but I'm doing it because of how powerful Venus's movements have been from her retrograde last spring and the eclipse season last fall. And there's just sort of an interesting little thing happening today through Wednesday that might show up in your relationship dynamics and in how you process feelings with your emotional body. So this week, it's a little bit like bumping into the lesson and then being inspired to make the choice that's higher, better, or will lead you to the desire you hold. So today, as Mercury is stationing and turning around and communication's going to be a little cranky from the neck up, we also have Venus in a square with Saturn. That's a lesson. That's a breakdown or a delay. By the way, if Venus and Saturn are squaring and it brings a slowdown or a delay of something, it's probably going to be positive or beneficial because it's Venus. The heart is saying, I know you want what you want and you're not going to get it today, but it's better to slow down and learn something. And that's what Venus and Saturn are saying today. It's like, don't move too fast. Remember what you've been working on around the giving and receiving of love and feeling deserving of all that's possible for you in the world of love and feelings. So there are awarenesses of lessons today and tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, there's this inconjunct from Venus to Jupiter. What that means is love, or the heart, is saying, if you change the track you're on, you'll get to the thing you desire in the first place. right? The lesson comes up now, then midweek it's like, what did you learn? Did you learn to make a new choice? Did you learn to let something go? Did you learn to speak up and be more courageous? Some shift that you learn in the first few days of the week might lead you to a fork in the road midweek. Same day as that, in conjunct from Venus to Jupiter, there's also a sesqui square from Venus to the north node of the moon. That sets us up to have important connections with others because of emotional material that might be frustrating or bothersome or a little bit challenging. So it's not an easy week this week in matters of the heart, but it could be an important one. And how to honor that is spend today and tomorrow just looking into your heart and seeing, is there something that I have learned or have been learning or am wanting to take on as a new piece of wisdom in my heart? And then look for the ways as the week progresses, even if it's a little bit scary or bothersome to do, to change the approach you're taking to anything that your heart really, really desires. There's something to be learned this week about taking responsibility for how you choose to love based on what you've been learning, and then look for the fork in the road or the road less traveled by as the week progresses, and make new choices when it comes to love. So we finished like we started. Happy New Year. I love that this is coming out on New Year's Day. You know, I think that 24 is going to be very similar in sensation and timbre and volume as 23 energetically. Not content. We're always in new, different content because we evolve and grow and change and shift. But in terms of the bumps in the road and the kind of friction that we're dealing with, we got another sort of preparatory year. As you know, if you've been paying attention to what I've been sharing, we got some things heating up a little bit in 2025 and 6. I talk about that a little bit in my Astro overview. But the year ahead is one where we are still preparing our consciousness to meet the great changes that are coming. I love that, kids. And even though the world has gone mad and it's a little scary out there, we did come at this time and are incarnated to help the planet transition from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. Brutal, frightening, bumpy as fuck, but I believe that we got this, kids, and join me to create the possibility of peace for humanity and have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Okay, this week we have a call-in dreamer, and her name's Catherine. She says, "Hi, Michael and friends. I love listening to your weekly podcast and was inspired to send this dream. First, a little background. I'm 70 and have been slowly losing my sense of smell over the past decade or so.
Oh, interesting.
Yesterday, I woke up with a dream in which I saw a row of flowering plants, almost looking like a border on wallpaper, but they were quite real. The amazing thing is that I could smell these flowers with no problem. Then another row appeared of green plants. No flowers. I could smell them too. A smell of greenery very different from the flowers. I was supremely grateful that I could smell again. That it was, and I was wondering how you would interpret. Thank you. So it's quite a short dream, but I
Oh,
love
wow.
this presence of
Yeah, but
senses.
so
Yeah.
interesting, right? Oh, I'm titillated by this. First of all, this is just bizarre, but Catherine, I actually have a diminished sense of
Oh, I didn't know
smell,
that.
like significantly. Yeah. This is just weird. Oh, 10, 15 years ago, I had this attack of acid. Just spasms like a hiccup. Think of a hiccup, like a spasmy hiccup, but but on crack, right? And then the next morning I woke up and I couldn't
Whoa.
smell at all. Zero. And I eventually went to a Western doc. When I explained what had happened, he was like, oh, yeah, you had an acid explosion. Your system got filled with too much acid and it destroyed your olfactory nerve. And so with acupuncture, over about a year and a half, I got 70% of my smell back. But I have diminished smell. So I'm flipped out a little bit because I have this experience. And Catherine, now you're losing your smell over a decade. And smell and joy, I think, are interesting to me. Right? We get great pleasure out of smelling. And there's this old adage that says that smell is sort of lower in our reptilian brain, that it's connected to deep memory, that smell and instincts are connected. Have you heard that, Joe? I mean, is
No,
that
I know
something?
smell and
uh,
taste are connected though.
well, yeah, that's a whole other thing, that perfumes impact the experience we have of tasting. But in terms of the body's expression of perceiving information, smell is considered very like reptilian within us. Smells can evoke memories deeper than ideas and
Wow.
thoughts and visuals. So you can have memory connected to anyway. So what the point I'm making is smell is visceral. Smell is animalistic. You know, we as human beings in modern culture, we have literally taken this away from us. We spend an entire industry is devoted to removing
Right. Oh
smell
yeah.
so that we walk around smelling like flowers and like greenery instead of like human beings. So there's something fundamental to me about the ability to smell and the joy that it brings. And in fact, Catherine, in her dream, that's what she's tapping into, both the joy of flowers and the joy of greenery, which are different. One is sort of fundamental and foundational greenery, very much about Gaia, Earth herself. And then flowers become the sort of expression of joy and beauty for its own sake. Of course, we express that beauty so that, bees will pollinate, right? So there's purpose to the joyful act of smelling. But that's where I go with smell in general, that it is primal, animalistic, very sort of base and functional in our embodiment, and it allows us to feel joyful. So I'm not entirely certain what else to say about this, in that we don't have Catherine here to sort of give us some feedback, but she's been really clear about what the dream included, and it is very simple. So she's also 70, which means she's way closer to her death than she is to her birth. And once we get into this period of time, like I consider myself in this as a man who is 60 and past my second Saturn return, that I'm in the elder developmental stage where we are preparing for a good death and we are seeking to make sure that our life feels meaningful to us. And so one of the things that can create a sense of meaning is the passionate joy with which we expressed just the beauty of being alive and in a body. Stop and smell the roses. Understand that we come from, this earthy, loving, heart-like place. So if part of what happens as we age is everything diminishes, we get slower, our bodies express pains and aches that we have to be respectful to. that, Catherine has a literal experience of less vibrance in her capacity to smell. And so the dream to me is reminding her of her pre-installed divine connection where joy is still there. In her waking life, it's diminished, but in her dream life, where the narrating mind that comments and judges is asleep, she's still as vibrantly connected to joy as she has ever been. And that's something that we all have to do with our sort of perceptions that says, well, joy, this is like something that I say about myself, that I'm at a place of integration where, thank God, I say, my happiness does not depend on how I feel. Because happiness, I define as something that comes from feeling integrated, from having less shadow and disowned selves, by understanding that joy is inside of me and pre-installed, and life has us age and diminish our capacity as we go. And so when that happens, we have to find joy in a different internalized way, so that we're not seeing the perception of I don't smell as well and therefore life is less joyful, is counterbalanced by the remembering of our humanity, that joy is always possible, and that we sometimes have to go into our unconscious to sort of be reminded that we are whole and complete. And then we wake up the next day with a diminished sense of smell, and we get to say to ourselves, life still smells sweet.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.